Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Hani Elkadi is a biology, health, and art teacher at the new Senior High Alternative Center in Iowa City. Since 1991, he has taught nearly 500 at-risk students. His philosophy of teaching includes, don't judge a book by its cover, encourage young people to help and believe in themselves, and go in depth so students will talk with their hearts and minds. In the fall of 1998, Dr. Al-Kadi received the Isabel Turner Award for Outstanding Contributions to Human Rights at the 15th Annual Human Rights Award Banquet. Dr. Al-Kadi said that the Human Rights Award was one of the top honors he has received. There are many chapters in his story. Besides being an outstanding teacher, Hani Al-Kadi is an artist, a writer, and a physician. Sculpting, illustrating, painting, printmaking have been his pursuits, as well as writing. Art has been a constant theme throughout his life. He received his doctorate in fine arts in Holland and Italy, and his master's in art education from the University of Iowa. In 1981, he attended the International Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa. It was at this time that he met his future wife, Ava Bardock. Another chapter in his story includes his time at the University of Iowa's College of Medicine as a visiting professor teaching anatomy and doing research. At that time, he received the Teacher of the Year Award in 1985 and in 1986. Born and raised in Egypt, Hani's mother is Turkish and his father was Egyptian. Welcome to One of a Kind.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to begin your story with your first family. Tell me a bit about your parents and how they influenced you.
A very close family ties. Father respects mother, which at the time we're talking here in the probably 50s. It was very strange because you live in a society where man is a dominant power at home. But my father had a Western education, and he learned a lot from the way, especially the French, think of the relationship in the family between the mother and the father. So there was a lot of mutual respect there. And my father was the emotional, passionate, heart-guided part of the family, and my mother was the cerebral, analytical thinker. So sometimes it's a reverse situation from what we see commonly, where the father is more analytical than the mother.
Who encouraged you in art and who encouraged you in medicine?
Well, this is a good question because, as a matter of fact, my father wanted me to do what I want. However, his philosophy was that we live in a place where people need more service, need more education, need more bread and butter and medicine. He was not objecting my tendency or inclination to be an artist, especially in the area of writing and painting and music. But he said to me when I was pretty young that this is maybe good when you live in a luxury society where everything is available. But when you live among our people who need for a lot of things, it's better to have a job that would serve. and then you can do your art on the side. My mother thought at the beginning that there is no way I should do anything but my art. And she told him in front of me that if I go and practice any profession, it will be just temporary. And it will be just a transient period in my life. But the major thing will eventually prevail. And I guess she was right.
She was right. So at a very young age, you were drawing and making things with clay?
Yeah, we lived, our house was overlooking the beach in Port Said, which is a beautiful Mediterranean little town full of fishermen and musicians. And our house was overlooking the seashore, so I go and play with the sand. And the first thing was making a lot of sculpture, sand sculpture, on the beach. And then, of course, I developed more technical sophistication, and I started watercolors and oils and clay.
You grew up along the Suez Canal.
That's correct.
And then you moved to Alexandria.
Yes.
And you have one brother. Is that right?
I had two.
Two brothers.
Now I have one.
One brother. And your mother is still living?
Yes.
In Alexandria?
In Alexandria.
Mm-hmm. You traveled a lot growing up, did you not? You went to Italy, you went to Holland, overseas, eventually came to the United States. Was that your doing, or was that your encouragement again of your mother or your father?
Both. I mean, my father's profession sometimes necessitated that he would travel from one country to another. He would take the whole family. But when I was young, it was, Egypt was a colony, one of the colonies of the great empire of Britain. So we had, number one, a chance to go and be educated in Britain and pay less than all other people who were not a part of the Commonwealth. And so it was easy for families which are, I wouldn't say, middle class, because in Egypt really there is no middle class. There's an upper class which have everything, and the poor and who have not. But we were, more or less, we owned at least our house. So most of the people who were called or termed intelligentsia or elite by the society, they would send their kids abroad. It was a common practice there.
What did your father do?
My father was a law specialist. He was specialized at law. But he quit law for some time and worked outside Egypt, doing a lot of diplomatic work. And then he went back to work in planning and organization, which was his area until he died.
Was he alive to see you get your medical degree?
Yes.
He was?
Yeah, he was. He was alive when I got my writing degree, my medical degree, and my art degree. Yes.
When do you sleep?
Well,
you have a lot of energy. You've certainly accomplished a lot.
I have a very easy answer, because I don't think at all that it is difficult for anyone to do more than one thing at a time. It all stems from the fact that you got to have some sort of organization. I mean, organization of time is crucial and indispensable. And if one knows how to divide activities, his or her activities, on the time that we have, I think we can accomplish a lot. So I know how to use the time. I didn't know this at the beginning, but I tried and tried. Eventually now I have a schema, or I have a way to deal with time efficiently.
Tell me, service has been a theme in your life for many, many years. And I read in the research that you volunteered and went to Africa during a famine to help out. Was this in the capacity as a physician?
Yes. Yes. Of course, you don't expect artists to go help in
No.
the famine.
No, that's right.
I wish this will happen, because, what happened since I graduated in medicine, and again, it's my father, and he said, well, you have two ways here, to be rich, and to make, to have your private practice and earn a lot of money. And buy a lot of cars and houses and marry a rich woman and be a wonderful young man. Or you devote your life to service of humankind. And this is noble. And he was the first to open my eyes to the history of physicians who have done more than just treating people and getting their money and saving them in the bank, but offering their help for people who are in need and use their profession in a noble way, as a mission rather than as a profession. And from there, I think I was so impressed by his outlook and his opinion. And I said, "What, will you allow me to go to wars, for instance?" He said, "Sure." And I remember he paid for my first ticket to Africa in a civil war in Tanzania, between Tanzania and Kenya. And I didn't have money to pay for that. And he said, "I'll pay your ticket and you go there and volunteer." And it was amazing. It was amazing how his power was pushing me towards service all the time. So I was in famines in Ethiopia and in Cameroon, and I was in civil wars. I was in the Middle East in many wars. So I guess you're right. My life has been, especially in medicine, devoted to the service.
Have you written about these experiences, or are they just too painful?
Well, I don't think I have yet reached the level of being that important, to offer my experience. I'm still learning, and I'm not trying to say this because I would like to look as modest and down to earth, but it's a fact that I'm still in the process of learning. And maybe when I retire, I will devote a lot of time to write, because I think the new generation should read that and that's why I welcome to be your guest today, because I want to talk to young people about my experience.
Writing, you did come to the University of Iowa. You were part of the International Writers Workshop. What's the story on this?
The story, I was, since I was so young, I was fascinated with the American theater and modern American poetry. And because I was in an English school, and that was not by my choice, by the way. I mean, you live in Egypt, you have to go to an English school and don't speak a word in Egyptian language, or you'll be punished, because we are a colony, so English is mandatory, is obligatory. You cannot choose something else. So my English was good, so I could understand the American theater and the American poetry, and I saw myself as a writer playing the role of translating some of the great works into the Egyptian Arabic, which is the dominant language in Egypt, and I did that. So I began as a translator, interested in the American literature, and I came to America to study the theater here and know about Broadway in the early 60s. And I wrote my best book was about the American theater. As a matter of fact, it's a huge book. And then I started translating poetry. And during the last few years of the 1960s and the early 70s, a wave of surrealistic poets started to emerge in the east coast of the United States, and I was so fascinated with the way they put the image and use the language, and the intricate way of using the syntax was not easy for someone who is not, whose language is not the native English tongue. But I did my best to translate this, and so my Stanley Kunitz was translated by me. And when he arrived to Egypt to read in the American Cultural Center in Alexandria, someone told him there's a writer in Alexandria who translated your work. So he was very intelligent. He said, can anyone translate from his Egyptian into English? Because I want to read it. Because he wanted the reverse process to happen so that he would see if I have understood the spirit and the soul of his work rather than the words.
This is the Stanley Kunitz?
Yeah. And
the
when
Pulitzer Prize
yes.
winning.
And when he saw that, he asked me to come to the dinner, and it was a very limited, I mean, there were a limited amount of people there. And he shook hands with me, he hugged me, and he said, you're the only one who knew my heart. Would you like to go to America? And that was the first. And I said, well, America for me was America, Vietnam, and America,
Vietnam
Lyndon
had
Johnson.
really, you'd read about it and had turned you off.
Yeah, and I was radical, and I was more to the left. And for me, America was the ugly, arrogant power. And I said, well, I was in America to study theater for a little bit, but I don't think I would go again. And he said, go to Iowa, it's different. And I said, well, I would try. You pay my ticket? He said, sure. I'm going to nominate you for the Iowa Writers Workshop. I don't know how it was done, but I think he talked to the cultural attaché in Egypt. They nominated me. I went through the interview process, and I was invited to represent Egypt in the International Writing Program of 1981.
And at that time, you met your wife.
Sure.
And tell me the story before we get into your teaching.
This
I know people love to know about how people met, and this was, you were here as a visitor.
This was a very important story because I saw my life, I was not very young, and I saw my life had already been consumed in those travels and being in famines and wars, and I saw my life end the same way, doing the same thing, just like Ernest Hemingway and all these people. And one day I got a phone call from a famous physician in town here that he would like me to come and visit the hospital. And I said to myself, no, I have enough hospital in my life, I have enough bodies and blood, and I'm not going to go to a hospital. And the person said, well, just come. Our hospital is just like a first-class hotel. And it's you're going to sit with me in my office, and I will show you what we do here. I would like to. I heard that you are a physician. I think it would be unfair to you to come to the United States and not see the hospital. We went to the athletic club for lunch, and then I went to his office. It was the first time to meet János Bardak, the eminent reconstructive and plastic surgeon of Iowa City. And sitting with him and talking about his life, I saw the parallelism between my life and his. Of course, I cannot compare my limited experience with his enormous ability to withstand and take and resist all the powers that he had to sustain. But I looked at him, and his words were resonating a lot in my heart about his life in camps and his family being killed by the Nazi, and then his travel to his life in the Soviet labor camps. And it was an emotional meeting between me and him, but it brought us so close together. And we had a tour in the hospital, and then I said at the end, I would like to see you again, and can we meet? He said, call me, and I called him 2 days later, the weekend. I said, can I invite you? Where do you go in Iowa City? And he said, we have a nice view in the Iowa Power Company. They have a restaurant, and you sit there and you see the dam and the water flowing. And I said, well, this is a good idea. But he said, I'm going to bring my family with me. I have my wife and my kid, my daughter. And that was actually the first time I saw Eva before attending a lot of readings. She was so interested in readings. It's the first time we sit side by side and talk. But that's how we met.
How you met.
What happened after that,
Yes.
that she did ask me if I'm an artist more or a writer. And I said, well, I don't know. I think my art and my writing and my medicine all together, they make one thing. And they are so entwined and interdigitated. And she said, what kind of art do you like? And I said, I like art in general. And she said, like who? And she started to ask me about names. Do you know about Monsieur René Magritte? I said, yeah, a little bit. And she said, and do you know about Miro, Juan Miro? And I was like struck because I didn't know much about art history at the time. I really make art, but I don't know much. And the poor young lady was like, oh, I don't think he's an artist. This man doesn't know it. She said, you don't know, I mean, do you remember this painting about the eye, and the pupil in the eye has clouds in it? And you don't know that? You don't know the man?
Magritte?
Yeah, there's the apple and the lion in the cage. You don't know all that. I said, yeah. She said, okay. It was different. She impressed me. I don't think I did impress her at all, you know. But that's how it began.
That's how it began. And then you went back to Egypt, and she came.
No, I went back to Iowa House, where I had my room, and I started thinking about this young lady. She's much younger than me, but she shook me, you know, like she talked to me about things in my area where I am the expert. She knows better than me, much better. And then the way of our conversation, I needed to see her again and talk more, and I needed to learn. So as a matter of fact, it was curiosity, and of course a lot of infatuation too. I mean, she's a beautiful woman. But then I went back to Egypt, and she came to visit to see the pyramids and the temples and the ancient Egyptian architecture and the Nile. And I thought this was going to be like 1 week of a visit, and I am her guide, tour guide. But it ended up by the wedding ring. So, and we married actually 6 days after her arrival to Egypt.
How wonderful.
And we're still married, and it's a very successful marriage.
That's wonderful. Now, that's a great story. I want to talk about your passion for teaching. It's obviously resonates with you deeply, profoundly, and it has to do, you told me before the interview, with this gentleman who was a physician and taught.
Yes.
Could you tell me about your philosophy of teaching and what you want to impart to your students?
Well, after I quit practicing surgery and research and teaching anatomy and all this long history that spanned nearly 2 decades, or more than 2 decades. I would not say how many, but
it's okay.
But I was determined to educate and go to be a teacher because I saw the relationship between medicine and teaching, and between writing a prescription and dealing with problem learning, and the way you analyze the fact and come to a diagnosis of the case. And I just at the time I happened to read about Janusz Korczak, and reading about him really shaped up a lot of my way of thinking at the time. I wish he would had been alive now, then he would be really the one of a kind, a physician that decided to use his great ability as a physician in teaching, and decided to teach alternative kids and the kids who are homeless and kids who live in an orphanage. And he had in Poland, before the World War II, a wonderful experiment of education there. And his writings illuminated and enlightened a lot of thinkers. I think Dr. Spock was one of them because he was influenced by the writings of Janusz Korczak. He was the first to look at kids as individual human beings with identity, with potentials. He never lost hope that you can teach and teach everyone, that everyone can learn. And failure of learning, when it happens, is not due to the inability of the student, but due to the incapacity and inability of the teaching process. And he wrote extensively. When the war came and Nazi occupied Poland and wiped out a lot of places, killed a lot of people, he and his school were moved to the Warsaw ghetto under the Nazi occupation, and everybody in the world respected Professor Janusz Korczak. And the Nazis offered him a safe haven to leave the orphanage and his school and go and have a nice life. And he remained with his kids, preparing them for the final moment. The time that he spent with his kids, the few months that preceded August 1942, when they were all shipped to Treblinka to be gassed there and killed, he requested to be taken with them. And he didn't leave them until he was already in the gas chamber with them. So quite a remarkable story.
You went there.
Yes, I went, I visited there. I visited there, of course, recently. I mean, I'm talking about 5-6 years ago, because I wanted to see the places where all this happened, all the Holocaust and the wonderful lives that were killed.
When did you get that book? When did he enter your life?
Oh, he entered my life long time ago.
Long time ago.
But I read very scattered readings about him. Some of his writings that were translated into French or into English, I read. But as a book, as a matter of fact, I got from a friend of ours who is professor of epidemiology in Poland. And he brought me a lot of writings about Janusz Korczak, because he knew that I was interested. And The Gate of Light is actually available. I mean, people can buy it, and it's available in the Western market.
Did you impart any of his teachings to your medical students that you taught at the University of Iowa College of Medicine, and you were named Teacher of the Year? I mean, was this important to you at that time too?
Yes, I think that my whole philosophy in education, my whole approach to the classroom and to the process of education was to a large degree shaped by this writing. And if you allow me, I would like just to read few sentences from his own writings. For instance, he talks about honesty and the quest for truth. And he says that honesty and the quest for truth are two central and indispensable traits for every educator. The educator must have the ability to admit his or her mistakes, confess to ignorance, and shy away from pretense and hypocrisy. He or she must teach his or her students to speak the truth and take care not to cause them to lie. In another sentence, he said, a bad educator blames the children for his mistakes or her mistakes. Another time, he talks about, he claimed that the educator's heart, his or her intuition, and his or her emotions are more important than intellect and cold consistency. So there were a lot of ideas in his work. According to him, the educator's attitude toward his or her students must be based on respect, mutual respect for the work and effort, on sympathy for the fate and the sincere interest in the future of his or her students. The educator must always perceive his or her student not only as of this present moment, but in expectation of the future as well. And it is toward this future that he or she must direct their education. That's important.
You must feel that this is just, you're at the right place with these, this alternative high school. And
Yes.
that's what you try
Yes.
with these young men and women.
Exactly. I mean, if you listen to this, for instance, he viewed cooperative learning, mutual discussions, independent, hand-on learning, and learning from each other as no less important. He quoted the Jewish proverb, I have learned much from my teacher, but from my friends and students more than all. This was critical.
What have you learned from your students?
A lot. I would probably replace, if you allow me, with all my due respect, instead of have learned, I would say, what are you learning?
Learning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning every day, every single day. I'm learning from them that, number one, every one of them is a treasure. And I always say, even to them, that I am just like a man carrying a bag of keys. And sometimes it's my luck. I have to try many keys to open this treasure. And sometimes it takes time, but for every treasure you have a key. And believe me, every student, and this is not a romantic, idealistic perspective. It's pure objective and scientific one. I still have my scientific mind. Every one of them is a treasure. But you need to know the key to open sesame. That's the thing.
You've used art a lot in your teaching,
Yes,
have you
I do.
not?
Yes.
You've got the young people involved in mural painting, and this must have been a pretty exciting journey and adventure for these young people, and then to have people from the outside community come in and see their work and honor it that way.
Well, part of my thinking is that my kids are part of the community. Some of them are having troubles adapted to the growing pains and growing up, and some of them have a lot of rebellious, intelligent motives to say no a lot, and some of them don't fit into the traditional kind of education that is very successful with the majority, but it does not succeed with few of them. And some of them have trouble marrying their education goals with their own lives, such as a young lady who has kids, for instance, or she's pregnant and needs to go to school, or she has another job and a child. So, I mean, not everyone we have in the alternative education is somebody who has learning or behavior problems. No doubt that we have some behavior problems and learning problems too. But this is another topic. Those kids belong to the community, and it's great for them to show the community the amount of love that they have, they treasured inside them. Sometimes they are unable to express that, even to their parents. While yelling at their parents and fighting with them, yet they have a lot of love inside them. And I have seen that when we go and stand downtown and paint a mural. You can see how they love the place, how they love the community, how they love people. And when you approach them, although sometimes they look untraditional, they look different, yet they are so friendly and so lovely and so loving. And so I decided from the beginning to use art as a way of improve their communication abilities and their abilities to be accepted by the community. So let us serve the community by beautifying, by going downtown and making murals everywhere, by going to the hospital school, working with the disabled kids and making nice paintings. And every one of us would accept the other, and every one of us would collaborate with the other, and there is no old and young. Everyone is respecting each other's work.
Are these students there for long, or is this a 3-year high school, or is this temporary?
The Senior Alternative Center in Iowa City is a new plan for serving kids who fit into the alternative education. And the curriculum and the approach to education is tailored to meet various needs, not only one track need, but some of them would receive care in a structured forum, classroom structure. And some of them would like more to do independent studies and research. And some of them would like more into the community service, and some we concentrate more on developing their life skills and their vocational training. So there are a lot of areas that we are trying to cover. We are in the beginning of our experiment yet, but I think it's promising and it's going well. It's a 4-year program, and students can come from the traditional school and spend either some time there until they are ready to go back to their mother schools. We are serving City High and West High. We're not separate. We are part of the system now. I mean, our center is not a separate entity. It's part of the system. So we try to get them back to go to their mother school and get a diploma from there. In few instances, we may accept a student till the last year, so they spend the whole time there.
You're hopeful with this new experiment, aren't you?
Very.
Good. I just want, my last question, there's so much in your life that we really need about 2 or 3 hours, but I do want to just touch briefly because I hear that you have 2 very special cats that mean a lot to you. Why are they so important to you, and what are they about? What do they mean to you?
Well, I thank you very much because, you know, Pushkin, for instance, is very interested in watching TV.
Ah, Pushkin.
Yeah. We have Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, named after the famous Russian poet, and we have John Ruskin, named after the famous English art critic and writer. So they are really very important in our lives. We don't have children, but those are our children. We love them, and they love us too. And you know, knowing animals is like knowing human beings, the same thing. And I don't see any difference between the way you love your pet and the way you love your kids and you love your community, the people around you, and people who love know how to love. It doesn't matter. It can be a plant, it can be a cat, or a little bird.
Do you tell your students about Pushkin? And
My students,
they know.
They know them.
They know
Yeah,
them.
they know about them.
What are you looking forward to down the road? You said you're a future type person.
Yes, I think I found my niche in teaching, and I like to remain as classroom teacher. I don't have any ambitions to be higher than that. I mean, I would like to end my life as a classroom teacher. However, I would like to see an alternative school that is a kind of magnet school in Iowa City, especially in Iowa City that's a very artistic, cultural center in the Midwest. I would like to see an alternative school that's a magnet school, especially for the arts, for performing arts, for poetry, for drama studies, extensive drama studies, for music, because I just love music, and I am a frustrated musician myself.
Another vocation.
I was playing piano, and I just couldn't, because really we need a lot of emphasis on the arts here, and this is a place where arts can flourish, and that's what I'm waiting for. And I know that our superintendent in the district, she would love to have a magnet school here. Of course, if we get the support of the business, and I'm not trying to.
No.
To
There's one in Minneapolis.
Here,
Minneapolis has
but,
a school like that.
Yeah, but I wish generous people would support a magnet school to absorb our alternative kids.
Well, Hani, to be continued. That story is not yet written yet. Thank you for being my guest. It's been delightful, and really, I've enjoyed it.
It has been my honor and privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. My guest on One of a Kind has been Dr. Hani Elkadi, a teacher of biology, health, and art at the Senior High Alternative Center. Some of the comments about his teaching include, and I quote, "He always will go the extra mile to help a student out of trouble or be friends with them." Or he never judges his students but accepts them where they are. He will do almost anything that is necessary to make the student successful. He feels that there is no hopeless person, end quotes. A former student commented that he helped me out through the toughest time of my life. He learns about the lives of the students and always gives his heart to his kids. As historian Henry Adams said, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his or her influence stops. Dr. Elkadi is a man of many parts, an artist, physician, writer, husband, humanitarian, and a teacher with heart. Dr. Hani Elkadi is one of a kind.